I've got a list of subjects I want to try to remember, but I know you'll get through them anyway, so no
Yeah,
problem.
I think so.
Okay. I quite wanted to start with the PhD really, and how
Okay.
you got going on that, why you got interested in the first place, and just how
Well,
you did it.
my PhD is from 1972 at George Peabody College for Teachers, which is now part of Vanderbilt University. It's arabesqued about a little bit. The Evolution of Electronic Musical Instruments in the United States, 1972. How did I get that topic? Well, the committee couldn't agree on what research is. I had spent a good bit of time in the psychology department with a substantial minor, 30 hours or more, with research tools, correlation, regression, analysis. I mean, research design, the whole business, and with the idea that I was going to become a researcher, particularly maybe in music. I was interested in math and so forth. I partly on my own terms, I found that a lot of the questions that research would answer, I no longer wanted to ask. Beyond that, literally, the committee could not agree. I mean, on what's a valid research topic for a PhD in music and so forth. So I knew that life and works was always something that never got turned down as a topic. The life of some, flagrantly and fragrantly unknown Baroque composer and his works and so forth. So I was interested in electronic music because of Dr. Gilbert Trithall was one of my mentors there at George Peabody. And my dissertation advisor, Charles Ball, told me, well, I don't know how we get around this impasse. Well, and then I began to wonder, is there enough about electronic musical instruments to warrant doing a PhD dissertation on them? And I went over to Vanderbilt Library, and lo and behold, there was a huge amount untapped. And I began to find these huge pictures of the telharmonium, and I'm blown away. A totally romantic idea, that in 1896 you've got these electrical instruments, and even before. So I proposed the topic, and yeah, it was accepted. And it's very fortunate. You usually only go through a PhD process once. You don't need to do it more than once, and you don't want to do it. But it helps you to have the topic that you're really burned up about. And fortunately, I got really burned up about this topic. And that's kind of the way it happened. And it led me to Bob Moog and my future career in electronic music. It's one of those rare PhD dissertations that really got me a job.
How lucky was it that there was a library with a load of good material close to you? I mean, how did that work out?
Extremely fortunate. And more so than the library, which had interlibrary loan, which mostly nowadays libraries don't do. It's too costly and so forth. That meant I could get stuff from Russia free. More important, the two librarians there, Lois Grice and Miss Birdsong, who I never knew her first name, just took an interest in my research. For one thing, I was so avid about it. I was there every day. I was working my head off. And I showed them the preliminary results, and they couldn't believe this tale, of these electrical and electronic musical instruments. And so, as much as anything, it was those two people that had, and the facilities of Vanderbilt Library and interlibrary loan. Of course, I've been lucky enough to be having the government pay my way to graduate school anyway. So my life is blessed with good fortune. And I'm quite aware of that. So yeah, the facilities were important. The people were important. The fact that Gilbert Trithall was into electronic music. When I first met him, I went into his studio. There were these long strings of audio tape, analog audio tape. And I said, what in the world is all that? He said, well, that's C sharp, and that's D, sine wave and sawtooth, and that's noise. And he, of course, like so many people of that era, was putting together electronic music with tape techniques. So I just got very interested in that. I was playing a little trumpet every now and then with the Nashville Symphony, and realizing this is a lot of fun. I love the music, but I don't think it's a good way to make a living. And thinking about something else. And when the Moog synthesizer came as part of this federal funding, this program that I was on, as a matter of fact, to support, I wasn't the only one. There were a number of fellows that had full ride to go to graduate school. And I took a look at the Moog synthesizer and I realized that's going to go someplace and I'm going to go with it. And that's pretty much how it worked. The combination of picking a topic that would bring me to the electronic music community, this history of electronic musical instruments, which, by the way, was worldwide. In the United States was one of those typical dissertation ideas that you delimit the topic. You have to be very careful. You're not researching the world. You're researching this small area of the world. And as a matter of fact, that dissertation has had legs to go places, dictionaries and so forth. The late Hugh Davies, a wonderful man, had used my research. And of course, he is really the guy for the history of electronic musical instruments and electronic music. He worked with Stockhausen and all kinds of people. But total man of integrity. Every time he even used a syllable that had been written by me, I got the what do you call it, the citation and everything. So, yeah, it's one of those rare cases where a PhD dissertation didn't just molder from dry rot. It actually got me a job, had legs to go places, informed people in the field, and created a small subculture of people that got interested in history. Reynold Weidenar then did a dissertation on the Cahill Telharmonium. Albert Glinsky did one on the theremin, and Steve Martin did the film on the theremin, and I helped all of those people. And yeah, it was very gratifying.
Okay, so tell me about the chronology. When did you start your PhD?
I started the graduate work in 1966. I'd been an undergraduate at Florida State and got what I felt was a thorough grounding in music. That's all there was. There was no music business, for electronic instruments in 1962. And I did it serially. First music, then business, and then first music, then music technology, and then business. Nowadays, my students are having to do all of these in parallel. Extremely difficult. But at any rate, I had the music education, or the musical education at Florida State. And then I came to George Peabody in 66 on this grant, everything paid. And I graduated in 72. It took me 2 years to research the topic and a year to write it. And as I had mentioned previously, if you're thinking about doing an advanced degree, make sure you choose a topic you want to live with, because you're going to live with it. And it needs to be something you really want to find out about and to talk about. So that was the case. I probably never would have finished the PhD had I chosen the original topics I presented to the committee. But fortunately, I wound up into the right one, and I was just burned up about it. And the two librarians that I mentioned, they became quite enthused about this project. What was happening in the real world at that time? Well, of course, Bob Moog had developed the Moog synthesizer around 1964, and the Mini Moog about 1970. So I was, of course, aware of all of that. As a matter of fact, as part of my dissertation research, I had made a visit to Bob Moog at the Moog plant in Ithaca. Well, not actually Ithaca. It's Trumansburg, New York, near Ithaca. It was an old hardware store that had been taken over. And, we crawled out on the roof of the first floor and sat there with my little tape recorder. And I interviewed Bob because there was so little room inside and so much noise and, chaos going on. A very busy time. And he put me on to some extremely important people. Raymond Scott, Wendy Carlos, Eric Sade, any number of people in the city, in New York City. And I went on to there, to the library, of course, and then went out and interviewed these people. And one of them wouldn't let me interview him, Raymond Scott. He was so worried about people co-opting his designs, and a typical inventor, a brilliant man. So what was happening at that time? Wendy Carlos had already had the big hit, Switched on Bach, and at George Peabody, where I was going to graduate school, we had about the only Moog in town in Nashville, Tennessee. Rick Powell, another connection from Florida State, one of my old mentors, had started Athena Studios, and my teacher, Gilbert Trithall, did an album, Country Moog, Switched on Gold, Nashville, some likely title like that, which sold 50 or 60,000 copies, not too shabby. And this then became the awareness, I think, when Wendy did Switched on Bach was first, oh, you can play tunes with this thing. You can make regular kind of music with it. And of course, with Rick Powell over at Athena, oh, you can do commercials with this thing. You can make money with it, And the profit motive being a nice and pure American ideal, that's what people started thinking about. And realizing that 1970, the Mini Moog, and then shortly on its heels, the ARP 2600, there were just a lot of people, and in the press, don't have anything to do with this artificial music and so forth and so on. Not very good semantic thinking in my way. There's nothing artificial about any sound. It's either sound or it's silence, and I'll have a lot to say about artificiality at some point, because I think this is what human beings do best. And I think it's what we're all about. So I didn't have any predisposition to not like music that was electronically produced. I played trumpet with the Nashville Symphony a little bit. I played with Tallahassee quite a bit when I was in college. And I loved it, but I realized very soon, well, this may not be the way to make a living. And it might not be as exciting as something new as I perceive the Moog synthesizer. It's going to go someplace. I'm going to go there.